Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. Chapter 6. The First Job Change, The Bone Sword. 006 The first time to change jobs, The Bones of the Sword. The skeleton of a skeleton soldier gave Sumu a 1.3 point growth in attribute value. It also includes 0.1 points of spiritual attributes. Mental attributes may be the most important attributes of the skeleton family. At least in the early days. The skeleton family is either descended from other races, this kind of skeletons are generally middle and high level, or the dead skeletons are born under the nourishment and nurture of the breath of death day after day, low-level skeletons. Regardless of the mid-level and high-level skeletons, those low-level skeletons like Sumu have only a pitiful 0.1 for most of their spiritual attributes. The spiritual attribute of 0.1 means that they have no memory, no consciousness, and they do not actively hunt other skeletons to improve their level of consciousness. The increase in their level is more due to the nourishment and nurturing of the ubiquitous aura of death in the bone burial ground. Such skeletons naturally cannot provide Sumu with spiritual attributes. If Sumu was an outlier in the skeleton family, the skeleton soldier he killed was a genius in the skeleton family. Maybe it was because the initial value of the mental attribute was relatively high, or maybe it was because the 0.5 attribute was randomly assigned to the mental attribute when the level was increased, so that the skeleton soldier had the concept of self and upgrade, and gradually grew up. Because of this, when other skeletons only have instinct, the skeleton soldier will actively hunt, and when it finds Sumu, it will attack Sumu as soon as possible. Of course, that's not the point. The point is, on this skeleton soldier, Sumu has obtained the job transfer information of the job template. Open black lens bracket template, close black lens bracket, skeleton soldiers. Rank basic occupation template. Bonus, health plus 50, strength 1, agility 1, constitution 1. Ability, skeleton armor. Bone armor. As the basic combat unit of the skeleton family, each skeleton soldier has the ability to convert skeletons into weapons. As Sumu guessed, in the skeleton family, there are two completely different concepts whether there are occupation templates. A 50-point life bonus directly doubles Sumu's life. This is also because his physical attributes far exceed other ordinary skeletons. If you put it on other skeletons, the 50 points of life bonus means that their life has been doubled. The same goes for attribute bonuses. Every time you level up, the three attributes of strength, agility, and constitution are all +1, and the total 3-point attribute growth is 6 times the skeleton's pitiful 0.5-point attribute growth. Not to mention, the ability that comes with the professional template, bone armor. This alone is enough to increase the strength of the skeleton soldiers. It can be said that if it weren't for the final blow to kill and shatter the absolute weakness of soul fire, the skeleton family, Sumu at this time would definitely not be a skeleton soldier's opponent. Skull soldiers. With the appearance of the career template, Sumu's mind also appeared in Sumu's mind about the transfer of relevant information. As the basic occupation of the skeleton family, the skeleton soldier's job transfer conditions are very simple. 1. The level reaches level 10. 2. Among the three attributes of strength, speed and constitution, 2 attributes reach 2 points. As long as these two conditions are met, it will be automatically transferred to a skeleton soldier. System transfer. If only one condition is met, you need to obtain the transfer information of the skeleton soldier before you can transfer to the skeleton soldier. And the easiest way to get skeleton soldier transfer information is to kill a skeleton soldier. Self-transfer. There are 2 ways to transfer jobs. The first one is fine. If you want to transfer jobs in advance through the second method, the difficulty is not that big. Either, like Sumu, he has far more strength than skeletons, or, luckily enough, he encountered a skeleton soldier who was incomplete or even dying frequently. No matter which way, as long as you complete the job transfer, you will achieve the leap of rank. From the most rubbish monster in the game world, the skeleton, to the less rubbish monster, the skeleton soldier. ... You have obtained the transfer information of the basic profession template Skull Soldier. The transfer conditions are met. Will you change to Skull Soldier? When Sumu finished checking the relevant information of the skeleton soldier professional template, the prompt sound of the system also sounded in his mind at the right time. Resisting the excitement in his heart, Sumu chose to change jobs. Next moment, a stream of heat was born out of thin air and poured into his body. Immediately after, his skeleton body began to change drastically. Maybe a second, or maybe a long time. By the time Su Mu woke up, his transfer was over. Compared with before the transfer, Su Mu's skeleton body has undergone tremendous changes. His height has increased from a little over 1.7 meters to 1.8 meters, and the bones that make up his body are even more sturdy. It is still a slender bone without a trace of flesh and blood, but it gives people a thick feeling. At this time, his properties panel has become open black lens bracket name close black lens bracket, Su Mu. Race undead race, skeleton. Template basic occupation template, skeleton soldier. Level 5 117 500ths. Status health 96, magic 16. Attributes strength 3.7, agility 4.3, constitution 4.6, spirit 1.6. Talent erosion, the only talent. Skill number. In addition to still having no skills, Su Mu's attribute panel is already complete at this time. As for skills, bone armor is an ability, not a skill. Just as humans are born to breathe, fish are born to live in water. Bone armor is also an instinct of skeleton soldiers, and it is more inclined to talents rather than skills, so it will not be displayed on the attribute panel. As for its role, mind a move, Su Mu suddenly felt strands of bone essence flowing in his body. In just a few breaths, a large knife appeared in his hand. The broadsword is nearly 2 meters long. Except for the half-meter-long hilt in Su Mu's hand, the rest is all the blade. The blade, which is more than 1 meter long, is completely pale, and it is completely condensed from the hardest bone on Su Mu's body. Obviously it is made of bone, but the blade and tip of this big knife show a hint of edge. Bone armor, the condensed weapon, is not a fixed style, but comes from the habits and will of the skeleton soldiers. From the moment of its birth, the weapons condensed into bone armor will become the exclusive weapons of the skeleton soldiers. And this odd-shaped sword in Su Mu's hand. If there are players here, they must be able to recognize it. This odd-shaped broadsword, which is incompatible with the background painting style of Second World, is clearly a big killer that once appeared in the history of ancient China. In reality, the Mo Dao. Skeleton sword. Chapter 7. Strange knife. It can be chopped or stabbed, it can be picked or teased. Known as a knife cut out, the people and horses are split. If there is enough power to use, it is a big killer in weapons. As for style, Su Mu doesn't care. Not to mention that he is only facing monsters now. Even if players arrive in the future, when the profession of blacksmith appears, countless strange weapons and equipment will appear in the game world. Besides, even if some players saw the skeleton sword in Su Mu's hand, they would probably think it was an Easter egg in the game, and would not associate it in other directions. As Su Mu's exclusive weapon, the skeleton mob is condensed from the hardest bones on his body. That is to say, the firmness and sharpness of the skeleton moblade are directly linked to Su Mu's physical attributes. When his physique attribute is only a few points, the skeleton sword may only be equivalent to the whiteboard equipment made of steel. When his physique reaches hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands, the skeleton sword may be comparable to epic equipment, legendary equipment, and even legendary artifacts. This is an exclusive weapon that can grow. With the skeleton sword, Su Mu no longer has to worry about his weapons, let alone pick up the skeletons on the ground as weapons. Job transfer completed. After getting used to his current body, Su Mu walked towards the deeper part of the burial ground. Just entering the inner layer of the bone burial ground, there is such a harvest. In the eyes of Su Mu, the burial place at this time has also become a huge treasure, waiting for him to dig and harvest. When officially entering the inner layer of the boneyard, Su Mu started hunting again. The four-dimensional attributes far surpassing that of ordinary skeletons, coupled with the big killer of the skeleton moblade, made Su Mu unfavorable in the face of countless strong skeletons in the inner layer of the bone burial ground. The bones were cut out with a sword. The enormous strength contained in it alone is enough to shred a level 10 skeleton and turn it into a pile of bones. Only skeleton soldiers who also have professional templates can resist a little bit. After killing dozens of strong skeletons and further improving his level and attributes, Su Mu replaced the hunting objects with skeleton soldiers with more experience and attributes. Click, click. In light footsteps, Su Mu crossed a hill made entirely of broken bones. A skeleton soldier appeared in his field of vision. LV-13. Skeleton soldiers. Deep into the inner layers of the boneyard, skeleton soldiers are not uncommon. Being able to transfer to skeleton soldiers, the spiritual attributes of these undead cannot be said to be high, but at least they already have the concept of self and the awareness of hunting and upgrading. When Su Mu saw the skeleton soldier also saw Su Mu. There is no redundant communication. While discovering each other, Su Mu and the skeleton soldier rushed towards each other at the same time. On the way to charge, the skeletons of both sides are ready to give each other a fatal blow at any time. Su Mu's weapon is the skeleton sword. The weapon of this level 13 skeleton soldier is a two-handed greatsword. When the distance between the two was getting closer and closer, the two-handed sword in this skeleton soldier's hand had already been raised, and with the power of the charge, it slashed towards Su Mu. Zhang. A dull clash sounded. Su Mu blocked the skeleton soldier's blow with the skeleton sword. It is also a skeleton weapon, and it is also a weapon formed by the condensed bones of its own. When the skeleton sword and the two-handed sword confront each other, there is only a white mark on the place where the skeleton sword meets, and the place where the two-handed sword meets, but there was a small gap. This shows that in the attribute of physique, Su Mu has surpassed this level 13 skeleton soldier. What's next? The mandible moved slightly, as if smiling. When the skeleton soldier raised his two-handed sword and was about to cut it down again, Su Mu had already cut out the skeleton sword. Zhang, zhang, zhang. 3 consecutive clashes sounded. In just a few breaths, Su Mu poured all his strength into the skeleton moblade, and slashed 3 powerful swords at the skeleton soldier. The skeleton soldier was forced to be helpless, and could only meet the skeleton Madao with a two-handed sword. With each slash, there will be an extra gap on the two-handed sword. After 3 consecutive slashes, the skeleton soldier's two-handed sword had 4 more gaps, like a saw. The 4th time, when the skeleton soldier habitually raised his two-handed sword and wanted to block the next slash, the skeleton sword in Su Mu's hand slanted slightly, avoiding the two-handed sword, and instead slashed in the skeleton soldier's grip on his right arm holding a two-handed great sword. Click. A crisp sound. Even a two-handed sword can't stop the edge of the skeleton moblade, let alone a mere arm. When the skeleton mo knife slashed, it was the skeleton soldier's right arm that broke off and fell to the ground. Next moment, the skeleton mo knife was cut out for the 5th time. The skeleton soldier with only one arm could not raise the two-handed sword, and naturally could not resist the attacking knife. When the knife light flashed, the skull of the skeleton soldier suddenly flew up and fell to the ground. The skeleton soldiers are not dead yet. Although it was divided into 3 parts, head, body, and arms by Su Mu, the parts of this skeleton soldier struggled to move, trying to reunite. Putting away the skeleton sword, Su Mu walked to the head of the skeleton soldier. Without the body, the head of the skeleton soldier cannot move. But through the dark eye sockets, Su Mu could still clearly see the vigorous soul fire of the skeleton soldiers in the skull. At this time, as long as Su Mu made a knife, smashed the skull of the skeleton soldier, or smashed its soul fire, the skeleton soldier was completely dead. On the contrary, he spliced the 3 parts of the skeleton soldier, and the skeleton soldier will recover quickly. But, leaning down, holding the skull in his hand, Su Mu thoughtful. The skeletons and skeleton soldiers killed by him, after being eroded by his talent, will be transformed into bone essence that enhances his 4-dimensional attributes. What if it was a skeleton soldier who wasn't killed by him? Can his erosion talent work on undead skeleton soldiers? If so, what effect would it have? Thinking silently in his heart, Su Mu activated his talent. No heat flowed from the skull of the skeleton soldier and entered his body. On the contrary, when Su Mu grabbed the head of the skeleton soldier and activated the erosion talent, he clearly felt something gushing out of his body and into the head of the skeleton soldier. Erosion. Before the talent was activated, the skulls of the skeleton soldiers were still struggling. Even without the ability to move, the mandible of this dense skull rattled, as if it wanted to bite Su Mu. When the erosion talent was activated, the struggle of the skeleton soldier's head slowed down. Until there is no movement. The process didn't last long. After about a minute, nothing was gushing out of Su Mu's body, and the head did not generate heat flow into Su Mu's body. At this time, a crisp system prompt sounded in Su-Emu's mind. Chapter 8. You have gained control of the skeleton soldiers. You enslaved the skeleton soldier. You can rename the skeleton soldier. The system prompt that sounded 3 times in a row caused a shocking wave in Su-Emu's heart. Control. Slavery. Seeing the skeleton soldiers who had completely recovered from their hands, and even their bodies were lying on the ground obediently, no longer struggling, Su-Emu's heart was more than just a surprise. Enslaved skeletons. Is this the second effect of the erosion talent? As if to confirm the thoughts in his heart, Su-Mu pressed the skull head in his hand on the body of the skeleton soldier, and even picked up the broken arm and placed it beside the skeleton soldier. Soon, the skeleton soldier's body and head were refused together, and the broken arm was also picked up by it and reinstalled on the half-arm bone. In just a few minutes, the skeleton soldier who had been divided into 3 parts by Su-Mu was restored to its original state. Then, after fully recovering, the skeleton soldier just stood there, as if waiting for Su-Emu's order. Skull soldiers. How many steps forward? Click. Click. When this thought appeared in Su-Emu's mind, the skeleton soldier took a few steps forward almost at the same time. After completing this order of Su-Mu, he stopped and waited for the follow-up order. It's really enslaved skeletons. It seems that erosion is the only talent. There are still many functions waiting for me to explore. After several trials in succession, Su-Mu also figured out how much control he had over the skeleton soldier. When he concentrates, he can completely take over the control of the skeleton soldier and control the body of the skeleton soldier according to his own thoughts. In this mode, he's even able to gain vision from the skeletons. After exiting this control mode, he can also control the skeleton soldier by issuing commands. For example, let the skeleton soldiers follow you. For example, let the skeleton soldiers hunt by themselves. In this mode, Su-Emu's orders cannot be too complicated, and the skeleton soldiers will only terminate the execution of the previous order after issuing a new order or cancelling it voluntarily. In simple terms, Su-Mu gets a little brother who is completely under his control. In a good mood, Su-Mu walked towards the distance with the skeleton soldier he named, Number 1. When he saw a level 9 skeleton, Su-Emu's mind moved, and, Number 1, carried his 2-handed sword and rushed towards the skeleton like a fly. A sword. The skull's head was chopped off by Number 1. Afterwards, it returned to Su-Mu with the head of a level 9 skeleton. Taking the skull handed by Number 1, Su-Mu activated the erosion talent again. After more than 30 seconds of erosion, the level 9 skeleton was also enslaved by him and became his second younger brother. But, this time Su-Mu didn't name the skeleton or put the head back on its body, but threw it on the ground, and smashed it with 1 foot. After taking a look at his attribute panel and finding that there was no change, Su-Mu asked Number 1 to collect the skeleton of this skeleton, and covered his already thickened bone palm on the skeleton. Erosion talent activated. No response. After completing these 2 inexplicable moves, Su-Mu ordered again to let Number 1 attack. Still targeting skeletons. This time, when he appeared in front of a skeleton, Number 1 did not keep his hand, and directly smashed the skeleton in front of him with a 2-handed sword, turning it into a pile of bones. At the same time, 2 system prompts have also been refreshed on Su-Emu's property panel. Your servant, Number 1, killed, strong skeleton. You gain 22 experience points. After repeating the above action again, Su-Mu ordered Number 1 to return to his side, and he himself pondered. With these inexplicable actions and commands, Su-Mu is not aimless. He was testing the second function of the erosion talent and the impact it had on himself. First, the beheading of the skeleton I enslaved will not bring me the slightest negative impact. Secondly, after the enslaved skeleton is beheaded again, it will not bring me experience points, nor can it be absorbed by the erosion talent, bringing me attribute value benefits. Thirdly, when the skeletons I enslaved kill the enemy, I will also gain some experience points. However, the corpses of these enemies cannot be absorbed by the erosion talent, which brings me experience points. So, the green light in the eye sockets flickered slightly, and Su-Mu secretly said in his heart, it seems that I don't need to carefully improve my strength according to the original plan to obtain a career template for the next rank. According to his original plan, After entering the inner layer of the bone burial ground, he would first hunt down strong skeletons of level 7 to 9 to increase his level and attributes. Wait until these skeletons are completely useless to you, then start hunting skeleton soldiers and continue to improve your strength. Step by step, upgrade your occupation from basic occupation to advanced occupation and elite occupation. This method of improvement will undoubtedly be very slow. The biggest benefit is safety. This is a real world after all, and Sumu has only one life. Before he becomes really powerful, Go is the real king. But, after developing the second function of the erosion talent and obtaining the ability to enslave skeletons, it seems that he can use a faster way to improve his strength. Enslaved skeletons. Core of skeletons. Undead scourge. After all, in the player's cognition, they are most impressed by the skeleton family. Apart from the weak combat power of a single skeleton, it is the undead natural disaster that is ubiquitous and drowns all enemies in a huge number. The scourge of the undead is just a fantasy for the current Sumu. But at least, he can piece together an army of skeletons. Chapter 9. Click, click. Light and neat footsteps sounded in the inner layer of the boneyard. In this land full of desolation and death, a group of skeletons are advancing. There are more than a dozen skeletons in this group. The skeleton in the front is sturdy, standing 1.8 meters tall, with an odd-shaped broadsword nearly 2 meters long pointing diagonally at the ground, either with a sword and a shield, or with a hatchet. Without exception, all the weapons are made of bone and pale in color. This is Sumu. From the time he captured the first skeleton soldier, he had been in the inner layer of the bone burial ground for 3 days. During these 3 days, Sumu hunted and killed a large number of skeletons and further improved his level and attributes. Whenever he encountered a skeleton soldier, he would swarm with his younger brother and crippled him. Then, enslaved, subdued. With the first skeleton soldier, taking the second one is much easier. With the second skeleton soldier, taking the third one is even easier. It's a virtuous circle. As time went by, Suemu's skeleton soldiers became more and more, and his strength became stronger and stronger. Later, whenever a skeleton soldier was found, he didn't even need to take action. The skeleton soldier under his command would charge forward, smash it in the first place, and hand it over to Sumu to enslave and subdue it. After 3 days of accumulation, the number of skeleton soldiers under his command has reached as many as a dozen. More than a dozen skeleton soldiers spread out in a mighty manner. All the skeletons in their hunting range, whether they are ordinary skeletons or skeleton soldiers with basic job templates, have all become their hunting targets. Countless skeletons were shredded and turned into experience points that poured into these skeleton soldiers and Suemu's experience bar. Numerous skeleton soldiers were crippled, or enslaved, and became part of Suemu's subordinates, or beheaded and turned into Suemu's experience points and attribute points. Now, 3 days later, not only the number of skeleton soldiers under Suemu's command has reached a dozen, but even his own strength has skyrocketed several times. Open black lens bracket name close black lens bracket, Sumu. Race undead race, skeleton. Template basic occupation template, skeleton soldier. Level 11, 234 1,000. Status health 230, magic 25. Attribute, strength 13, agility 15, constitution 17, spirit 2.5. Talent, erosion, the only talent. Skill, number. Suemu's 4-dimensional attributes at this time are more than double those of his skeleton soldiers with an average level of 15. More than a dozen skeleton soldiers, coupled with his own strength far exceeding the skeleton soldiers, could have swept the entire inner layer of the bone burial ground. After subduing 2 skeleton soldiers again and increasing the number of his younger brothers to 16, Sumu walked towards the central area of the burial ground with his skeleton army, which was beginning to take shape. The central area of the bone burial ground is the largest area in the entire bone burial ground, and it is also the place with the strongest aura of death. The outer and inner layers of the bone burial ground may not even cover a corner of the central area. Here, it is also the most dangerous place in the burial ground. The skeletons on the periphery were confused and ignorant. The skeleton soldiers in the inner layer actively hunted to improve their strength, and when their strength reached a certain level, they entered the central area. Central region. All skeletons, or in other words, all undead will fight. They seek experience points to improve their level. They also seek job transfer information, intending to upgrade their occupations from basic occupations to advanced occupations, elite occupations, and even warrior occupations. Even on the top floor of the bone burial ground, those high-level undead with the lord profession are still fighting with each other. Strive to go further. Peripheral, inner layer, center. The three regions form a perfect closed loop. In the player's perception, this is just a huge leveling point. The massive skeletons and various undead are enough to support them through the early stages of their game careers. In Su Emu's world, this is a huge killing field. As one of the most brutal races in the second world, Su Mu, a skeleton, never had the power to choose freely. Or, just like the sullen skeletons on the outer and inner layers, passively accept the nourishment of the breath of death and become stocked leaks. After the level reaches a certain level, it will be harvested by other skeletons or skeleton soldiers. Or, just like those high-level undead in the depths of the burial ground have done countless years ago, they will continue to upgrade, continue to advance, and rise against the trend until they become the monster lord who dominates the party. That is, the boss in the player's mouth. Other than that, there is no other way. Su Mu didn't want to die. I don't want to be a leak to be slaughtered. The only thing he can do is to improve his strength as soon as possible and strengthen his power. Until, pierce through the entire burial ground. 17 skeleton soldiers marched into the central area of the bone burial ground. The strong smell of death filled the air, making Su Mu feel that he was getting stronger every moment. Of course, passively accepting the nourishment of the breath of death, the powerful speed is naturally incomparable with the active upgrade. Su Mu estimated that with his current level, he would only be able to increase one level by surviving here for at least a few months. The strong breath of death naturally gave birth to more powerful skeleton soldiers. Skeletons below level 15 are extremely rare in the central area of the boneyard. Even if such a skeleton breaks into this area, it will be killed in a short period of time and become the nutrients for the growth of other skeletons. Skeleton soldiers of at least level 15 are eligible to survive in this area. The central area is huge. The distribution of skeleton soldiers is also relatively sparse. Half an hour after entering the central area, Su Mu encountered the first skeleton soldier in this area. LV-17. Skeleton Soldiers. Chapter 10. A level 17 skeleton soldier, stronger than any of Su Emu's younger brothers. Only if he personally took action, he could kill him unscathed. But, why pursue unscathed? When he saw the skeleton soldier, Su Emu's mind moved, and 16 skeleton soldiers around him swarmed out and charged towards the level 17 skeleton soldier. After paying the price of a skeleton soldier's broken arm and a skeleton soldier's fracture, the 17th level skeleton soldier was beheaded, and the intact head was sent to Su Mu by number 1. Erosion talent activated. Enslaved skeletons. In just 1 minute, this level 17 skeleton soldier was enslaved and became one of the many skeleton soldiers under Su Emu's command. Subsequently, the skeleton army, which has reached 18, started again and moved deeper into the center. After half an hour, the second skeleton soldier appeared in front of Su Mu. 17 skeleton soldiers rushed out, and in the shortest time, the skeleton soldier was disabled and handed over to Su Mu for slavery. Number of younger brothers +1. After an hour, the third skeleton soldier appeared in front of Su Mu. Number of younger brothers +1. 2 hours later, the fifth skeleton soldier appeared in front of Su Mu. Number of younger brothers +1. 3 hours later. Erosion talent is like a cheat. Not only did Su Mu have 4-dimensional attributes that far exceeded his rank and level, but it also made his power grow rapidly like a snowball. In less than a day after entering the central area, the number of skeleton soldiers under Su Emu's command reached as many as 30. When the number of younger brothers reached 30, Su Mu no longer blindly pursued the increase in number, but began to raise the level of himself and the many younger brothers under his command. 30 skeleton soldiers, divided into 10 teams, began to hunt in this area. A team of 3 skeleton soldiers ensures that even if they encounter higher-level skeleton soldiers, they can kill them smoothly, turning the skeleton soldiers they encounter into nutrients for their upgrades. In addition, Su Mu has spread out a total of 11 teams, which can expand the hunting range and hunt the skeleton soldiers in this area with extremely high efficiency. In this hunting mode, almost every few minutes, a new system prompt will be refreshed on Su-Emu's attribute panel, which is 10 times more efficient than when he was hunting alone. 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours. After a day has passed, Su-Emu's level has soared from the original level 11 to the current level of 16. The 3 attributes of strength, agility and constitution have all gained 5 points of attribute growth. In addition, during this period of time, Su-Mu personally killed the skeleton soldiers and plundered the attribute values from their bones. At this time, all his 4-dimensional attributes, except for the spiritual attributes, had broken through to the 20-point mark. Strength, 23 points. Agility, 21 o'clock. Physique, 25 points. Spirit, 4.5 points. Such an attribute is comparable to a level 30 skeleton soldier. It stands to reason that the lower the monster level, the higher the occupation template, and the greater the future potential. After all, after the career advancement, there is no attribute compensation for the previous level. Suppress the level to get more potential. But this does not apply to Su-Mu. With the erosion talent, first stack up your own level, and use the attribute growth obtained by leveling up to strengthen yourself. When his level is high enough and his 4-dimensional attributes are strong enough, he will hunt down existences higher than himself in a crushing attitude and obtain a higher level occupation template. The lost attributes can be completely made up for by the erosion talent. Even. The pile is higher. If possible, he would like to immediately raise his level to the full level of 100, and then slowly seek a higher level occupation to make up for his lost attributes. A level 100 skeleton soldier might not be the match for a level 70 legendary juggernaut. But it's still easy to break through a burial ground. Pity. It's just fantasy. Even with the existence of the skeleton soldier's younger brother, which has increased his own leveling speed tenfold, he still has to hunt step by step to improve his level and strength. Time flies. Just as Su-Mu beheaded an 18th level skeleton soldier and was about to absorb the essence of its bones, a message suddenly appeared in his mind. Your servant, 25th, is dead. Just as Su-Mu was slightly stunned, the second message emerged immediately. Your servant, no 27 feet is dead. Skeletons die in battle, which is normal. This is the central area of the bone burial ground, not to mention a mere skeleton soldier, even the death of a higher rank skeleton is extremely common. But, when letting these little brothers go hunting, Su-Mu alone ordered them not to go deeper into the burial ground. The fear is that there are higher order skeletons in the deeper areas. In more than a day, number 25 and number 27 had already raised their level to level 17. A team of 3 skeleton soldiers acted together, but number 25 and number 27 were killed in less than 2 seconds. Could it be that there are high-level skeletons appearing in this area? Too late to think about it. Su-Mu took over the control of the 26th skeleton soldier for the first time. Vision shift. When Su-Mu's own vision was replaced by the vision of the number 26 skeleton soldier, he only saw a dozen or so skeleton soldiers surrounded by an extraordinarily strong tall skeleton. And that skeleton, which is a little taller and stronger than the current Su-Mu, is holding a 2-handed sword high and slashing towards the number 26 skeleton soldier. Pale white edge flashed. When Su-Mu's vision turned back to his own, a third message emerged from his mind. Your servant, no 26 feet has died. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe.